Is it right to spank your child? If so, up to what age? If so, do you use a hand? Do you use a stick, a rod of some kind? This is a question that is asked by most people who've raised their kids. They're trying to raise their kids in accordance with the scripture. Is it right to spank? Does the Bible teach corporal punishment? Was it a different culture then? Is it a different culture today? Do kids respond differently just to words today? Let me say a few things at the outset. Number one, people are people. In other words, it's not like one generation is going to respond to words only, and another generation is going to respond to words and corporal enforcement of those words, corporal punishment of some kind. It's not like human beings are going to change fundamentally. Now, there are different cultures. There are different settings, and that I understand, but human beings are human beings. So, for example, a few years back when Sweden passed a law saying that parents could not spank their kids, that to me was fundamentally saying human nature has changed and we no longer do what past generations do. That raises many questions to me. It's not to say that there has not been abuse with corporal punishment, but the idea that human nature is going to change and that in past generations, through most all societies, there's been some type of corporal punishment and now it's eliminated. There were some bold churches that said to the government of Sweden, sorry, we're not going to comply with that. We feel it is important at times to reinforce words with corporal punishment. Now, what does the Bible say in the book of Proverbs, the 23rd chapter? This comes up a few times, but let's look at Proverbs chapter 23, verses 13 and 14. It's written there, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with the rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. Save his soul from the grave. Save his soul from death. You know the saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. So yes, clearly, in Proverbs a number of times, it does reinforce that there is a place for corporal punishment. Again, these things need to be done in keeping with other biblical admonitions for parents to love their children, for parents to nurture their children, for fathers not to provoke their children to bitterness or anger. In other words, there is a right and wrong way to do everything. Everything must be done in love. Nothing is to be done just in anger and spite. And many parents realize that if they're angry, that's not the time to discipline physically. They need to calm themselves down and do things in a way where they can explain, this was wrong, you lied, you rebelled, you knew what was right, this was no misunderstanding. Johnny's 4 years old, he knew exactly what he was doing, and Johnny is going to be punished. And there's something that Johnny does not want, and normally a spanking is part of that. Now, again, if you're going to literally look at Proverbs and think, well, you beat them until they die and you did not quite kill. No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying if you spank your child, you're not going to kill your child. And the way some children respond, you think you were killing them. But it is not a license to abuse physically. It is not a license to hurt or disfigure or maim, God forbid. Rather, in the context of using corporal punishment to reinforce words and to say there is a penalty. Yes, you want it to sting a little, so as it stings a little, the child will remember this is something negative, this is something I do not want to do. If your kids are always on their best behavior and all you need to do is use words or just a look, and that's perfectly sufficient for them, and they understand the consequences of crossing certain lines, hey, that's between you and God and your kids. But corporal punishment, certainly something taught in Scripture, certainly something that done within proper bounds is good and healthy for kids, does put a certain fear of God in that sense into them, colloquially speaking. I was not spanked much by my father growing up. I only remember a couple of times. And I remember him clearly not wanting to do it, but making clear this is a lesson you have to learn. And I did learn the lesson. I remember one particular time, I remember the particular lesson, and it's a lesson that stayed with me. whether a hand is used. Some say you don't want them to look at the loving hand in a negative way. These are all things. There are great parenting books that discuss these things. You can see what worked and didn't work well when you were growing up in your own home. Each child is going to be different that you raise, but generally speaking, the Bible is positive on corporal punishment, but let it be done in keeping with the larger parameters of being loving, nurturing parents.